Yay, guys. Welcome to the first 15 series at the Birthlink podcast. I'm excited today. I have been kind of ruminating on this subject. Every night I close my eyes and I just go to bed and I think about the placenta. I am thinking about the placenta right now so much more than I did when I was pregnant. It's crazy. But that's what happens when you dive in and you start researching something. I am doing this mostly for this episode and the podcast to share stuff with you. But man, like one thing I read just leads to another thing, and I get engrossed. And I've probably left this episode maybe with more questions than answers. But listen, despite that, I'm going to share with you what I learned. Pretty interesting learning about all the history of the placenta from ancient cultures and like rituals and beliefs. And I thought it was so interesting to read about it. So I do implore you to check it out yourself and maybe dive into the research and the history, and that may motivate you or steer you towards doing something with your placenta that you may not have thought of doing before, which I think is pretty cool. Again, this episode is just to inform you guys. I am not going to steer you one way or the other. It's just not my decision to make. It's yours. And it's not against the law right now to eat your placenta. So if that's kind of what you're thinking about, then listen in and we'll go through some of the benefits and risks that I found. Why it's become so trendy in the last 50 years. And what have we done before? Like, have humans always been eating their placenta and this is just like coming to light now? Or what? Are we really just comparing ourselves to animals right now that live in the wild and do some crazy stuff? I don't know. Take it how as you will. Let's jump in right now. Welcome to the Birthlink podcast, presented by My Friend's a Nurse. I am your host, Colette McCullicher, a high-risk labor and delivery nurse right here in sunny California. I'm also an OB certified specialist, birth educator, lactation expert, and mother of two beautiful daughters. I am passionate about guiding you through the miraculous journey of pregnancy and childbirth, using evidence and history and asking the reason why. I have some incredible medical friends and colleagues, and we're all here to help you navigate this often overwhelming birthing hospital system in the United States. My goal is to gain trust in birth, improve this system, and provide some valuable insights. Let's make this journey a little less daunting and a lot more joyful. Let's get into it. Hey, so I'm really excited to get into the subject today of placenta, where we'll talk a little bit about the encapsulation, but of course, knowing me, I want to know about the history of placenta disposal, eating the placenta, what's going on here, why are we all of a sudden doing this that I'm hearing about, and is it appropriate? What does the evidence say? What do the experts say? Let's jump into it right now. I'm excited. I did a lot of research over the last week, a couple weeks on this, heading into this, and I had like more than 20 pages of information. So then I had to just kind of compile it together. And all the resources are in the episode description. So make sure you check it out or just start Googling, guys, look into it, find out all you need to know about this question. What are you going to do with your placenta after birth? Have you even thought about it? Maybe not. We'll get into what happens when you don't think about it. Pretty simple, but we'll get into it. So before we jump in, let's discuss what the placenta is, right? So it's about a 1 pound mass of tissue that was formed alongside the baby. And this tissue actually brokers the sharing of resources between the mother and the fetus. It maintains that uterine environment, it filters out toxins, and it disposes of waste, right? It's actually the body's only temporary organ that we build just for this baby, right? It's actually the baby's organ, right? And it's conjured up by this little embryo and then expelled when the job is all done. Pretty cool, right? It has blood vessels all over it and they spread across the surface and it looks like this wide tree, branching tree, just beautiful. It's can be very symbolic of what we're creating, right? Life, the tree of life. It starts forming maybe a week after conception, and then it takes over and starts doing its job around 12 to 14 weeks. right? It's completely formed between 18 and 20 weeks, which can be why we start seeing issues with maybe preeclampsia, gestational diabetes. We are all kind of starting to link it to the placenta, all these complications during pregnancy. So it's not actually you, it's the baby. It's the baby's organ. What's going on there? We're not going to get into that part today. This is the first 15. So there's decisions you have to make around your placenta and what you want to do after it. And it's a decision that is going to be done right after you deliver. So not the time that you want to be like, oh, maybe I should keep that placenta and do something special with it, right? No, that's not the time. You want to dive in and make that decision before it ever comes up, right? So let's talk more about the placenta. So imagine this like disc shaped, it's like a spongy structure. It's about the size of maybe a large dinner plate. And it's composed of both you and the baby. So there's little DNA parts of both of you, the mom and the baby. And those parts are just intricately woven together and then separated by a very thin membrane. It's absolutely amazing. It provides all these essential functions of filtering nutrients like oxygen, glucose, and amino acids, all filtered through mom's bloodstream and then delivers them through the baby, through the umbilical cord to the baby. It also removes all the waste products from the baby's blood and carries them back to mom and maternal circulation for disposal, right? So you're the house, the baby's just living in it, doing its thing. It's just so amazing, right? The placenta is also this hormonal powerhouse. It's producing hormones that regulate pregnancy and prepares the body for your childbirth. It's a selective barrier, so it shields the baby from these harmful pathogens while also allowing nutrients like essential antibodies, not really nutrients, I should just say antibodies, from your blood and to pass through, which gives the baby some immunity for when it's in utero and for after. So amazing, a little head start there. So among animals, right? Animals, placentophagy, that's what it's called, or eating the placenta after delivery is actually quite common. It's this instinctual behavior of animals and mammals actually to eat their placenta that this piques our interest on why. Like, why are they eating their placenta? Well, let's talk about it, right? Let's talk about some of the instinctual reasons that an animal out in the wild might eat their placenta, right? Okay, one, super rich in nutrients, like super heavy in protein. I think I read like about 48 grams of protein in a whole placenta, about 400 calories. It has lots of iron and fat. So consuming it was going to provide this kick of energy for the mom right after giving birth, right? Especially important for those that are delivering multiple offspring or they have really short intervals between pregnancies. So they need this nutrition and this energy to keep going. They may have to change locations very quickly, or maybe they fasted for a bit. We'll talk about that too. Well, since we know it houses hormones, right? These animals might ingest it to help possibly regulate her own hormone levels during the postpartum period. So this might be really beneficial for easing that transition and reducing the risk of like mood swings and depression. Yeah, animals can get depressed, right? It can also possibly help with pain after delivery, right? There's some studies that suggest that the placenta may contain these compounds, and I won't go into all the details about it. I think I wrote 3 pages on it, but it is known to enhance the natural painkillers that are produced by the mother's body. So consuming it then would offer some pain relief after delivery, which is pretty cool. I also read it can, because of the oxytocin that's stored in there, it can help contract the uterus. So if you eat it raw right after birth, it can help contract that uterus and prevent hemorrhaging. I have heard of some midwives giving raw placenta to the mom to help with that. And she needs to eat a whole bunch of it. And it's known to do the trick, honestly. Anecdotal evidence is in play here, but I have heard it. And then, so that may be a reason why in nature they do it as well, right? For those animals out there. So placentophagy, eating of your placenta, it can also possibly help the role in strengthening the mother-infant bond, right? We've talked about skin to skin and breastfeeding and sight, smell, all the senses. What about eating your placenta? Is that going to help these animals bond with their baby? Possibly. The act of eating the placenta could trigger these maternal instincts and encourage caregiving behavior, right? So that could be a reason. It's a theory. Additionally, eating the placenta, getting rid of it, it's going to reduce the risk of attracting predators, right? It's blood, it has smell, and animals want some nutrients. They want to eat the placentas. Those carnivores are coming. So they're going to be drawn to that, and they need to get rid of it. So these are just some of the reasons that we found that animals may instinctively consume their placentas, but let me stress that this isn't like a universal thing. Not all animals are doing this. Not all mammals are doing this, right? Primates and humans, for instance, do not, right? Until actually recently there's always these like every now and then you'll see a case maybe of a primate or a monkey eating their placenta, and it may just be out of desperation. Maybe one of the reasons that we said she's starving, that baby's hungry, I don't know. So we have heard of it. We've also heard of animals and primates eating their stillborn babies that come out. I read one story on that. That was great. I read a lot researching this, but all of these reasons, honestly, that I gave you around the animals, it's just theories at this point. Nothing has really been proven. It's just so crazy. There was this one study, it's Crystal et al., which suggests that the causes that motivate animals really depends on the taxonomic group, so their species in which they belong. This can instigate this behavior, and it just becomes part of their instinctual, innate methods of survival that they exhibit during labor and birth and after birth. It's the same thing as like making their nests and moving away from it very quickly, site displacements. So why are they doing these things, right? I feel like it's all for survival. That's why they do anything for the most part. But curious, very curious. Other studies propose that the placental consumption or intake is due to the feeling of actually just being hunger because they fasted during labor. Many animals are not eating during this period, including humans, right? We don't get to, especially in the hospital, unfortunately. It's not all females. I know like rats and giraffes still eat up to 24 hours before delivery. So they're fine. They're not starving. But a lot of animals don't eat at all. And it could be days, right? Just that temporary change in their feeding preferences during labor could be why some of even the vegetarian animals, what are they called? Herbivores, practice this. Right. So let's take like rats and monkeys that don't normally eat meat or want to. They have been shown to reject any meat that's given after birth, right? But then they went and offered rabbits, right, liver and placenta during labor and observed in postpartum, and they observed that they would actually eat the placenta and the liver 100% of the time when it was offered to them. But if they offered that same food any other time, only about 10% of them actually went ahead and ate it. So just interesting stuff. It's not across the board guide when they say, well, animals did it and mammals do it and blah, blah, blah. You're like, well, why? Why? And is that so true? Right? For humans, then, women, they might then have those same needs, those same innate instinctual needs, like in very poor regions where, this placenta, it's super nutrients, it's nutrient rich, and it has all these trace elements, essential and non-essential amino acids, and all these vitamin B's and iron, everything that they need, the antibodies. So they need to get those calories and that protein and fat in their system, and they have no other method. Otherwise, they will be deficient. They may have more of a need to eat their placenta after birth. And that's kind of the only places we have actually seen it. It's like a desperation kind of situation, because other than that, like currently, there's no actual ethnographic accounts of placentophagy among humans as a like traditional cultural practice, right? We're not seeing this anywhere in the world where it's normalized and a any type of ceremony process or ritual or anything like that where they're actually eating the placenta can't be found. But in the last 50 years, honestly, that interest that has changed, especially in industrial cities in the United States. We're kind of changing the way we see placenta. It's kind of interesting, if you ask me. In the 1970s, women just became inspired by this like natural world and animals and mammals who eat their placentas, right? And they started reasoning, like going through the theories of why they do this, right? And they began to explore it, right? The method they mostly chose, besides raw, the more common one was dehydrating the placenta, grinding it into a powder, and then encapsulating it in pills for easy consumption. We know and we've heard of this being done thousands of years ago, like in China, ancient Chinese medicine, of dehydrating it, grinding it up, steaming it, dehydrating, grinding it up, and using it as medicine, right? But these are very rare cases, and we'll get to that in just a moment. Other than that, this is the most popular way that we like to do it in the United States. So proponents of this, those that either participate in this service, provide it, or have done it, or are interested about it, they believe that it offers all these benefits for postpartum mothers, specifically eating their own placenta. It includes hormone regulation, reducing symptoms of postpartum anxiety and depression, improved energy levels. It contains that iron and other nutrients, right? Just like we said. So this can help prevent fatigue, which is such a common struggle after we're tired, right? So I know we want this magic pill and we're thinking it might be the placenta, but we should question that if that's true. But I don't know. It's getting more popular because of celebrities, right? So I had to look at who was eating their placenta, who was making this popular. And then in this current, in the last 10 years, I can name, let's say, Hilary Duff, who had a smoothie. Kim and Kourtney Kardashian were some of the few first to state that they were doing this. January Jones, Alicia Silverstone, Mayim Bialik, hello, Blossom. Blossom is like a neuroscientist, right? So I was like, okay, she's smart. She gets it. She knows. Let me see what she said on her blog. She basically just said that it's good for mammals to eat their placenta, and we evolved for that purpose. That's all she said. She gave no evidence on it. That's a belief. To me, it's like, okay, it has to be a belief like the Bible or religion. Where are you coming from with this? Sometimes it's just deep inside they have a feeling and they want to do it. Okay, go get it, I guess. It's up to you. But these are some of the ones. Let's see. Who else? Holly Madison, wasn't she at the Playboy house? Okay, get it, girl. Katherine Heigl, is it Heigl? She took pills. Padma Lakshmi, who I love her, was a top chef. She took the pills to ward off postpartum depression. Like, she feared postpartum depression more than being tired, more than anything else, more than even the risks of eating it. So that was probably more just for her own peace of mind to do anything to help. So was it a placebo? Possibly, but who is to say, a placebo isn't worth it, or doing something and mentally just believing it isn't enough? Why not? I'm all about it. Like, take a placebo or eat the placenta if it's going to make you feel better. right? So those are a few. The claims made from the placenta encapsulators, so these people that provide the service, they include supporting an increase in milk production, right? Along with the postpartum treatment and preventative treatment for postpartum depression, but milk production, right? Neither of the claims are based on current research. Nothing has been proven. And it doesn't really make physiological sense due to the placenta having a lot of progesterone and what progesterone does to prolactin. We need prolactin to create breast milk. So they're still looking into it. They want researchers for the most part want to know, but they're not really able to prove it. I think they proved it in cows that there was a significant increase in lactose when they ate their placenta. So that's where they're getting this from, right? But if you look at it, the animals, we're all so different on how we respond because we have different hormones and they work differently in our bodies, how we're consuming them, and what does dehydration do to it? Are we killing everything? So should we be eating it raw then? These are the questions that you want to go. Let's look into a little bit more, right? Because all the research that I found, like the actual evidence that say like from the doctors and everyone out there that's saying, no, you shouldn't eat this, right? Their research indicates that there is actually this negative effect of placenta consumption, encapsulation, and milk supply. So yeah, we got to keep, but I couldn't find anything else significant on it. So it just has to be like research further for us to really have an understanding if this practice should be recommended or encouraged or not. At the moment, it's not, right? And we'll get into the reasons why not in just a minute, but let's look a little closer at the benefits that they are touting to eat your placenta and what evidence has been finding for either of them. Okay, so first let's get into giving mom more energy, right? Okay, so yeah, the placenta does in fact have the vitamins and minerals like B12 and iron. But metabolic studies in moms who consume their placenta versus those who didn't, however, showed no significant difference. So moms who do report more energy from the placenta may likely be experiencing a placebo effect, right? Feeling empowered by the decision, or like they just ate a really great meal. Either one, I think, if that's what you want to do, then great. But you do, to feel all of that, you just based on it, you do have to kind of eat the whole thing. So this one little capsule is not going to be giving you anything. It's like taking a little portion of a steak and making it into a capsule and taking that and thinking you're going to get all this energy. It just doesn't work like that. So that's a no, unless you have absolutely nothing else to eat that could be better and you are just starving. Then that can be an option, right? It would increase your energy, but they're basing it on placebos on people that they both ate, but did the placenta do anything different? So you could probably just get like a good burger or something if that's maybe what you're more into. Okay, then, if that's the only reason. Okay, then what about increasing your milk supply? So in studies on this subject, it shows no benefit, right? No benefit was noted on the milk production. It's actually, like I said, it's the milk production. We need the oxytocin and the prolactin levels. We need those to rise to create milk. But the hormones in the placenta, like estriol and progesterone, they're actually like counterproductive. And those are the ones that are found in the placenta. There is also oxytocin in the placenta though. So I found that. I said, why didn't they include that then? Maybe it's the oxytocin that's causing the milk production increase, right? Just right along with all the hormones are in there. So look, I question all of this stuff. Honestly, where are these studies? What are they doing? I'm trying to look for them, but that's just what I found, right? So you're going to have all these hormones kind of working. They're all there in the placenta for the job of developing the fetus and the baby and keeping the baby alive and developing properly. That is the function of it. It's not to then be consumed and then do the job of creating breast milk. Your body's going to do that all on its own. And we can't find enough evidence to show that it's actually like a huge reason, a huge proponent for it. So at the moment, for humans, I couldn't find anything to actually prove that that's true. And it was really hard to prove that it's not true, to be fair, but they give us what they want us to know, I guess, when we look for stuff. Well, okay, let's get into postpartum depression. What about decreasing that risk, right? Sometimes the placebo can be enough for that, but what about the placenta actually? Well, we know that after delivery, you have a huge drop in hormones, and progesterone just plummets, and we're feeling all sorts of ways and emotionally that can really affect us during that time. So what about eating the placenta with all those hormones, right? Well, the studies that I found, they actually show no to very little difference in postpartum depression risk between the moms that ate their own placenta and those that didn't. So even among moms with a history of mood disorders, okay? If you really want to eat your placenta and you have a mood disorder, or you are very worried about postpartum depression, then I mean, don't count it out. I'm not here to steer you one way or the other. I'm just saying, like your health is top priority, and your mental health too. So if you really feel like this can help you, and maybe it is just a placebo, but who cares? Like, maybe it's the whole process of it. Maybe there's a ritual or ceremony you can do instead that can also be a placebo if you're worried about infections or reasons why you don't want to eat your placenta, or you just kind of freaks you out. What else can you do that can be more symbolic and spiritual or ceremonial, that can help you during this transition? That alone can help. But if you need the placebo effect, or you want those pills and you really believe it's going to help you, then, go for it. It's everyone's for themselves, whatever you need. We talked about the energy, right? But what about a nutrient boost for mom and baby? Did you know, like, you could get that powder of the capsule, and then some women will sprinkle it on their nipples or on the bottle's nipples and give it to the baby? Yeah, that's been doing it, right? But yeah, they didn't find that to be any different either. I was really, really trying to find some evidence or something to show something, but they weren't giving it to me. Honestly, they say that a healthy, balanced diet is going to generally provide a new mom with all the fiber, protein, and nutrients that they need, right? So even adding a multivitamin or placenta, it's not going to make this huge, significant change for the nutrients that you're missing in your diet, right? Unless, of course, you're in less developed countries, very poor countries, where you may be starving, there may not be food available, right? So your diet alone may not be adequate, and you'll need supplements, and you may need to consider eating your placenta right after birth. You have to survive. It's a survival, right? For the babies, they need your breast milk. So as long as you are full of nutrients, then your baby's going to get it too. This is just what the evidence right now is showing, right? Maybe in 50 years or 20 years, they're going to prove all of these things correct, and that's what some women really believe. So more power to you. Keep it going. But as of now, we're not finding anything, right? So what about that reduction in pain and also maybe speeding up the healing, right? That's kind of cool. Well, some evidence actually found this to be supported by animal studies to support this theory, especially that pain situation with a lot of opioid receptors and all these things that I go into it. I have, like I said, I have a couple pages on that one too. Really interesting. Maybe I'll have to do something about that, but it gets pretty deep too for me. And I'm like, this is getting complicated, but it does show that in animals, it can help with their pain levels. This, like acting like an opioidic, I think that's what it's called. But they haven't found it to actually be true for humans and human benefits. So still, jury's still out. Maybe a possibility. But again, animals, we all react really differently to the hormones and what's going on in our bodies. Then there's the saying that the placenta is safe for consumption. Then you'll hear that a lot, that it's completely safe, but you're going to find a lot of organizations, a lot of providers that totally disagree with that, that it's not safe because the placenta is not a sterile organ, right? It contains, yes, it contains all those nutrients and vitamins and all these things that we need to survive because we were feeding the baby and we need the baby to survive. But it also is going to take all those toxins that what the baby was getting rid of and that the mom needed to dispose of, and they're in there too, chilling in the placenta too, waiting to be disposed. So that's going to be like mercury and lead, as well as all the potential bacteria and viruses that are there trying, not being given to the baby, but so stored in the placenta and ready to be disposed of, and they're chilling in there. Your placenta did a great job, hopefully, of keeping them away from your baby. Maybe not. Maybe the baby got a little bit too. Also full of antibodies and all these other things. It's just a whole universe in the placenta. So when you're eating the good stuff, you're also going to be eating the bad stuff, right? And that's what all the doctors and providers and experts are more worried about than anything, right? They don't want to do any harm. They said, is the benefit worth the risk? And it's kind of unanimously no at this point because there's just not enough evidence to prove otherwise, right? The placenta, it has its own bacterial culture there. Like this just things are going on in that placenta. And then as soon as you deliver it, it starts dying. So it's decomposing. And, it's up to you if you're going to eat that bad boy and if you're going to eat it raw or how soon and how you're going to store it, how you're going to keep it, right? It can be really serious. So, any infection that has been happening in the labor too. So there's chorioamnionitis. We just call it choreo sometimes, but chorioamnionitis. That's an infection that can happen during your labor, right? So that infection, that bacteria is still going to be present in that placenta, and then you're going to eat it. So normally, if you're in a hospital, if you have any type of infection, you're not getting your placenta, okay? Sometimes even if you have had a really heavy meconium, like baby passed meconium and it's really thick, you're not getting that placenta, right? That placenta has poop all over it, in it, just embedded in the walls. We don't want you eating it. That's going to be a no-no. So most likely, any infection is going to still be present in there. Cooking it, you can say, well, I'm going to cook it, but, that'll decrease the bacteria levels and maybe virus levels, but it cannot get rid of them completely. Even if you do things at the highest standard, highest level, it just can't get rid of them completely. So, science-based studies of placentophagy to date just indicates that the risk of placenta consumption is far greater than any benefit, as that will be that bacteria, those infections will be passed to mom and to baby if you're nursing. So just keep that in mind. Listen, between you and me, I'll get into it right now. Let me scroll down because I just have to say, I just tried to go in and find what the rate of infection was for moms because they're like, it can cause infection. It can cause infection. So I was like, okay, well, what's the rate of infection? Like, how many moms that have eaten their placenta are reporting infections? And I couldn't find anything. There's one, and I'll get into it. I found one important study or case, I should say. But other than that, if you have anything, please send me. I will probably continue researching this. I kind of find it fascinating. But I couldn't actually find, okay, then, if there's such a huge risk, where's the percentages? 10% of moms that ate their placenta past it. Where are the numbers? Where is the proof of even the infections? And I couldn't find it, you guys. So I'm like, oh, okay. I've been going back and forth on the placenta. I personally did not and would not eat my placenta, my baby's placenta. It just kind of grossed me out. That's personal. That's my personal belief. To each their own, if that's what they want to do. Honestly, it's a little like eating one of your own body parts or your baby. Ugh, I can't. I'm sorry. Okay, as long as I don't think about that, then I can get through this episode. But shake it off. Okay, let's go on. Let's find out more about the history of it. Okay. So I know researchers, they've been pretty unsuccessful at validating all these claims in larger scale, maybe small, but in larger scale studies, they can't prove any of this stuff. Okay. We get it. We know it. I honestly couldn't find much to prove the other way either. But what about just like worldwide? What's going on in other countries? Is anyone else besides the US eating the placenta? Well, besides the very poor that we spoke of, honestly, I couldn't find anywhere else in the world that they're doing this like traditionally. And even countries like Spain and Italy, they kind of view it as a form of cannibalism. I get it. I kind like it's funny that I am saying this right after I almost gagged, but like, yeah, a little bit. So, but you know what? Like we said, the placenta is such a unique organ where we're dispelling it. It's meant for just that purpose. Once it's passed, we do not need it anymore in our bodies. The baby does not need it anymore. So it's very unique. Should we be looking at it like every other part of our body? I don't know. This is just trying to be informative for you guys so you can make your own decision. So I won't push my opinion anymore, but I think you get it. Okay, how about like in Australia? It was clear for the women that had a home birth that the placenta was not going to be this afterthought. They're going to put some time and thought and their heart into what they want to do after they deliver, but they're not eating it. Okay. Usually they're going to make very specific and deliberate decisions about how they want to handle it or how they want to hand it off to the medical personnel, right? Honestly, it could really benefit us in our postpartum experience to find a way to acknowledge and honor the placenta and what it's done and the passing of women into motherhood, the matrons, and what's going on with that transition. Maybe shouldn't be just thrown away in a incinerator, but given a more thought provoking and spiritual goodbye, right? Like so many other cultures and societies when it comes in throughout history when it comes to placentas. I want to get into it just for a minute because don't you want to know what people have been doing throughout time? I think there's this medical anthropologist, well, two of them, Daniel Binchik and Sharon Young. They both were at the University of Nevada, and this is what it is in 2010, and they started analyzing the traditions of exactly 179 cultures for how they handled the placenta, right? They found that among 109 communities that define culturally appropriate placental rituals, there were 169 disposal methods. So a lot of different ways that they handle the placenta. It included burial, incineration, intentional placement in a specific location, or like hanging in a tree structure. One of the most common methods would be burying under a tree. Many cultures, the tree is thought of as this like protector of the child. So delivering it, planting it underneath to provide nutrients to that tree would then protect the child, and that the tree's health would kind of foreshadow the child's well-being and prosperity, which is pretty cool. In Jamaica, bits of the placental membranes were put in an infant's tea to prevent convulsions caused by ghosts. So again, very spiritual. It has a lot to do with their beliefs and their culture, right? We had different places that they place their placenta in receptacles for 2 months to just dry it out, and then who knows what they did with that afterwards. Probably just buried it or turned into ash, and it had some ceremonial, some prayers, a ceremony to say goodbye. Across the Americas and like South American Latin cultures, the indigenous cultures, they believe that the placenta was a living being. So according to a Latino custom, the placenta is buried to prevent animals from eating it and then to decrease mother's pain. Because if the animal eats the placenta, it's believed that the mother will not be able to bear any more children. So it wasn't just to like take the sense off of them and protect them as they lived, but it was a more detailed, spiritual reason why they were going to hide the placenta, because they just didn't want the soul to be cursed in a sense. So let's just say they're just not thrown in the trash, right? They're just not discarded like that. So many cultures will do, like they believe that it's a twinning of the child and the placenta. So it's just as important as the baby itself. In ancient Egypt, the placenta was considered by many to be the child's secret helper. So pieces of the placenta were soaked in milk and then fed to the baby to test for infant mortality. So I don't understand how or why. I wish I was a fly on the wall then and what they really believed, but that's all I could find on the ancient Egypt. And they did a lot of things like with the pharaohs and these ceremonies. And I won't go into all of it, but I think ancient Egypt is probably the most interesting. Let's say some Icelandic and Balinese cultures, they see the placenta as the baby's guardian angel. It's amazing. But who's right here? I don't know. Among Navajo Indians of the Southwest, it's customary to bury the child's placenta within the sacred four corners of the tribe's reservation as a binder to ancestral land and people. So very important. In many traditions, people believe that the improper handling of the placenta is going to affect the fate of the mother and the child. So just like in the Latino cultures, indigenous tribes, it's going to affect their health and the child's abilities in the future. So these rituals, then they have to be performed exactly, and they can be really, really involved, really detailed, and it's things like requiring that the placenta be washed in a very special liquid, wrapped in certain fabrics or plants, and then placed in this specific vessel and buried or set in a specific location, right? But many of the rituals investigated by anthropologists or social scientists more broadly, there's just one thing that was just notably absent all the time, and that was eating the placenta, right? It's let's say, okay, the Bible itself, it doesn't specifically forbid eating one's placenta. It's mentioned in the context of being like cursed rather than blessed. There's also scriptures that say you're not going to consume blood. So it was just off-putting. They consider it almost to be in line with eating one's own child. So they really do compare it equally with either a soul or some spiritual significance, that they're not going to eat their placenta or their own child. Let's talk about pagan culture. So European pagan customs includes burying the placenta under a tree, a fruit tree for a girl and a nut tree for a boy. And trees are sacred to pagans, and thought behind that this custom is that the tree that your baby grew from is going to go on and nourish another tree, and they're going to build another tree, right? So it's just a growth. It's life continuing. So basically around the world, all these traditions, customs, rituals, beliefs around the placenta, like these practices relieve this anxiety that usually accompanies labor and birth and the transition to motherhood, right? Like that's what I'm getting from it. And it goes on and on. We can't end this segment without talking about the Maori in New England, right? They actually have a special word for the placenta, and it's the same as land, wenua. Traditionally, wenua were placed in a hollowed out gourd, or earthen pot or a woven basket, and then they're buried in a place of significance to return them to Mother Earth. So it's all very beautiful how they're doing it. Later, the British came and said, none of that. They said it's a primitive ritual and it's unhygienic and we got to stop doing this. They regarded it as super superstitious. So the Maori started treating it the same way as the European conquerors did, which is just like medical waste. And they started throwing it away. And it wasn't until the 1980s that a small group of activists, they sparked this resurgence of traditional placental burial. And again, it's common practice, same as in US and how we're kind of standing up to them. So yeah, so basically out of all those 179 different cultures, they couldn't find anything that showed that any of them consumed the placenta, right? If anything, they would avoid eating the placenta. They actually believe that, like the Latino culture, if it was consumed, that maybe like by another animal, that it would do harm to the mother or child. So something significant though is Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine then, because a lot of what we hear is touting this as a significant reason why we would consume is because it's been done for 1,000 years by traditional Chinese medicine, and they're continuing to practice it. A lot of TCM providers may tout that, but a large significant amount of them do not, and they say this is actually not a practice, right? What happened? I mean, okay, let's get into it. So a little bit about Chinese history with that. We'll skip, let's see, 400 BC, that was during the time of Hippocrates, and 200 BC in China. They was used as a healing agent after bodily injury, right? And then let's say the great tyrant of the Qin dynasty in China, they would use it as like this special medicinal use for longevity of life, like where they're going to be able to live longer. And the Egyptian Queen Cleopatra used it for cosmetic purposes. So they knew that it was special and they were using it. The oral administration of placenta was also reported in Vietnamese medicine to aid the recovery of those suffering from tuberculosis. So yes, it's true that over 1,000 years ago, it was believed that they could augment qi, which is energy, and blood, and yin and yang and jing, or vital essence, to balance these out through the use of the placenta, right? And they use they did the same way, steaming it, dehydrating it, creating into a powder, but it was very rare and they used it very sparingly. It was very expensive. It was hard to find. And it was never given to the mother. It was actually always given to others, maybe to the king or to like men or anyone that's suffering from specific diseases, right? But it was never actually given to the mom right after birth, and they're found no reason to do that. In fact, after birth, she is in such this immunocompromised state that they wouldn't want to give her anything that could give her an infection or would be dirty in a sense, right? So yeah, there's let me find her. Can't find her right now. There's so much information actually on the history of Chinese medicine with regards, like, let's say this one researcher and traditional Chinese medicine historian, her name's Sabine Wilms, WILM. She has done like a PhD research on Asian studies and medical anthropology. She's translated numerous ancient Chinese medical texts. She spent her whole career and life focused on this. And she has stated, so I'm going to believe her regarding Chinese medicine with regards to eating your placenta. And she has stated that it is not a traditional Chinese medical practice, and it must not be promoted as such to unsuspecting patients who trust us and trust them to care for them safely and confidently with treatments that have undergone the critical tests and experience of many centuries and thousands of highly educated professional physicians. So she say, trust the medical physicians all over the world and these practices she's like, it's not done in ancient China or traditional Chinese medicine to give placenta to moms after they deliver. All right. Okay. I told you I like 20 pages worth of stuff, and I'm just trying to give it to as much as I can pretty quickly, best I can, but lots of information out there. So basically, the practice of some contemporary Chinese medicine practitioners is to recommend the encapsulation to postpartum women, saying that it's this Chinese medicine treatment for postpartum, but it's completely contraindicated. It's completely false from classical texts to those who are to know appropriate care and appropriate TCM. So make sure who you hear this from is legit. Okay. Yeah. So we know this now. Today, ingesting one's placenta is going to remain potentially risky, right? That's what is said because we don't know too much about it. It's so new. You have to understand the risks. And we mentioned it. The biggest one is that it's colonized with bacteria, and many of them are infected. So as a general rule, it's best not to eat something that's potentially teeming with bacteria. A lot of them are pathogenic. The organ carries also traces, we talked about arsenic, mercury, and lead. So and that can affect women's like reproductive hormones and how maybe they don't get infection, but they get all messed up because they introduced all these other things. Were you trying to eat clean during your pregnancy, or are you worried about like too much plastic in your life and BPAs and all of this stuff, what you're ingesting, what you're giving to your baby and passing to them? Then this should be pretty significant for you. You're like, would you eat a piece of raw meat? So really think that over, right? Or taking the raw meat and that you don't know what's in it and then cooking it up and then eating it. You do your homework, right? The FDA right now, they haven't spent too much time or effort conducting any research on the benefits, unfortunately. And then you could also argue that as soon as they do, it's going to be regulated and you're going to need to get approved. And there's going to be so many restrictions and rules about the process. And that's actually going to make it really a lot harder for moms and babies who decide and prefer to consume it. So a little bit on both sides, right? There's really no standard that exists for processing the placenta for conception. I think heating it to 130 degrees Fahrenheit for 121 minutes is required. So 130 degrees Fahrenheit for 121 minutes. That's what you need to reduce the salmonella bacterial counts. That's all we know alone. That's all I could find. But heating for sufficient time at a temperature adequate to take out, let's say, group beta strep bacterial counts, it can't even be reached, and we can't find it. So just know that they can't get rid of the bacteria, and anyone that states otherwise is lying to you. And honestly, that GBS is probably one of the biggest reasons that they're touting this infection, I believe, because that's literally the only thing I could find. I think in 2017, all these new articles about infection if you eat your placenta came out because there was a big case that happened in 2016. And this is one baby that got really sick. It actually got sick right after birth. Mom was negative for GBS, but baby still developed respiratory issues right after birth and tested positive after being cultured in the NICU for GBS. Interesting, crazy. So maybe mom had it, maybe it was passed. How did baby get GBS? They don't understand it, but the baby spent 11 days in NICU and had the whole full dose of antibiotics, was all better, went home, and then 5 days later got readmitted, came back to the emergency, and tested positive again for GBS in the blood, right? But here's the thing, the breast milk tested negative. So how is this baby getting it? It was very, very interesting. A lot of serial exams were done to find a source, but they just couldn't. Then they found out that the mom had dehydrated her placenta and were taking these pills. And they tested the pills. She was taking them like 3 times a day. They tested the pills, and actually it was positive for GBS. So there was GBS in the placenta, and that's how the baby got it. And mom tested negative, but then the mom started eating it. But then it also tested negative in the breast milk. So I'm still personally a little confused on this story. But yeah, it is that they called it and diagnosed it. And also, is anyone in the house affected with GBS? Like, what's going on? This is the one case that they ruled then as a late onset GBS disease that they attributed to a high maternal colonization secondary to consumption of GBS infected placental tissue. So that's what they said it was. So then all these articles started coming out, and a big notice that you could get infection with eating your placenta. And I honestly can't find any other case. And this case is a little confusing, and it's one. Please let me know. I'm sure they're out there. There has to be other infections, other things going on. I just couldn't find it. And, I'm still believing them, right? Because it makes sense that there's a risk of infection, and that's probably what they're going on. But is it a theory as well with one case? I'm confused. If you please send it to me, Colette@myfriendsandnurse.com. If you have more, I'm going to continue looking. But, I'm still a little confused on what's going on. Where are all the cases? What's the percentage? What's happening? Why are they saying it can cause infection? And that's the main reason why no one is. But you know what? They're also not usually saying no. If it really did cause that much problems, then they would say, no, you cannot. There would be more laws about it, right? We love throwing laws to protect members of society, but they're not. Maybe some are. So find out in your area, because what happens to the placenta in the US is governed by law, by state law. Okay. So it's going to vary depending on where you give birth. And even when you're permitted and you're like it's lawful, because some areas it's not. So you have to find out. Some hospitals are still resistant to give you placenta. So it's probably because of these studies, but not all. So look up your placental rights at cordblood.com. I'll put the link in the description notes as well, so you can find out what's happening. So not all states are going to allow, and hospitals are going to allow moms to take their placenta. I did see one case where the mom had to get a court order to do so. So the court order alone, the fee is going to be like $150 plus the attorney fees. If she had to pay for that can be like $750 or more. So that all has to be done before you deliver, so that you'll have that court order to allow you to take it home. A lot of work, very expensive. What is it worth to you, right? Especially for those that don't allow you to take it home. Most hospitals do that. Most hospitals and states that do allow it, you're just going to have to sign a liability waiver. The doctor may have to sign it, and you may have to sign it. So honestly, it's only for the women that are delivering in hospitals that are going to have to deal with all of this, right? So if this is getting very expensive, or you're just not wanting to jump through all these hoops, then you gotta probably deliver at home or maybe a birth center, right? The American Hospital Association just doesn't have this like one set policy on the practice, and it's not tracking the hospitals that don't allow it. So you're kind of on your own on this part, and do the best you can, okay? And then once you get your placenta, whether you birthed at home or you got it in a hospital and you got to take it home, maybe you have someone come pick it up for you. Let's finish off the episode by jumping into what you need to know and what you need to do and what options you have, right? So once you get it, whether it's because you want the energy, or you want to lower your chances of postpartum depression, or you're a more sentimental, spiritual person and you want to maybe take your own ancestry or culture or spiritual beliefs, or you just want to start a new one. I think that's so beautiful. Do that, right? So you can plant it under a tree. That's very meaningful to a lot of families to plant it. Some create that powder, but not to ingest it. Instead, they mix it like with moisturizer, and we're said to like help with your skin. I don't know. Maybe it's the amino acids, I guess. I don't know. Again, you're chancing putting some bacteria and stuff on your skin. So yeah. There are companies out there that will create take that powder and make it into jewelry or like keepsakes, which is pretty cool. You could bank it if you're collecting your cord blood and your tissue, which the actual cord, then you can ask them if they also accept placental, because it has that amniotic sac that's also has different stem cells and can be researched later, right? You can donate it to medical research. And then there's always the option to just simply dispose of it by your medical team. Like, we'll take it. This usually involves storing it in our refrigerator until you're discharged. We keep it just in case something comes up where we may need to send it to pathology and study it a little bit. But otherwise, once you're discharged, we send it as medical waste and it's incinerated. We do not sell it. We do not sell your placenta. We get nothing from it. We just dispose of it. And there's laws out there to protect that. Actually, the laws around disposing of placenta coincide with these larger set of laws that guide proper disposal of biohazards, and that came about in the 1980s, right? Because we started seeing all this medical waste and like syringes and stuff coming up on the beaches, and they're like, "Ooh, that's gonna have to stop." So Congress passed this Medical Waste Tracking Act. So it's required to have a subset of a demonstration program set up so that we have laws about strict packaging, labeling, tracking, sterilization, and incineration. So we got to follow those laws. If you're in the hospital, just understand that. And some of those biohazard waste, they can be stored in the refrigerator, but others can be stored outside in containers. We usually can leave the placenta out for a little bit, and then we want to put it in the fridge. So, yeah. So sometimes also we send it, your provider may want to send it to pathology to study it if they suspect that something was wrong with the pregnancy or the delivery, and the placenta could offer some clues. So some reasons would include a poor pregnancy outcome. So you have maybe premature or IUGR, intrauterine growth retardation or restriction, perinatal death, and asphyxia, like they stop breathing. There could be some systemic maternal disorders like the preeclampsia we talked about, gestational diabetes, third trimester bleeding, or any evidence of fetal or maternal infection. They want to go culture that placenta and find out. So it's going to provide that pathology is going to provide really useful information for interpreting the signs and symptoms that we see on the outside with the mom or the baby. And then it could also explain some abnormal testing that was done during pregnancy and identify some treatable conditions so that we can have, better outcomes with that. We could also probably then predict future complications and treat those and prevent those early on. So if any issues come up, we want to send that to pathology and ask about it. If they send it to pathology, you got to check in and see what the results were when they came back. They could also do a biopsy on the placenta to test for chromosomal abnormalities and any other genetic issues. So that is something that we do in this new medicalized state we are in, and we should take advantage of it, especially if we've had a really hard pregnancy. Okay. In Massachusetts, at the Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, like for an example, they send the placenta right away to surgical pathology first, and then it's available for patients to pick up. So they're doing a very special way. But in general, if your placenta goes to pathology, it becomes a liquid, and it becomes used. They insert all these chemicals to it, and they're not going to allow you to take the placenta home. So if it has any infection or any of that, you don't really want to, or if you want to get more tests done to it, then you have to then decide whether it's more important that you keep that placenta maybe to do a ceremony or whatnot, or to send it to pathology. But just understand that if you do, you will probably not be getting it back. All right. All right, so let's say all said and done, you're jumping on the trend, and now you decide that you want to consume it. Let's get into a little bit of the process, right? We talked about steaming it and then dehydrating it and then crushing it and making it into a powder, and that is then encapsulated. So that is the most popular way, but you could also steep it in liquid So create like a soup and cook it in there. You could just eat it raw right out of the gate, get all those benefits. So you're not getting rid of the nutrients and stuff through cooking, but you're also accepting the risks of all the bacteria and viruses that may be in there as well. You're like, screw it, I don't care. And you just like eat it. Maybe you're like delivering at home or free birthing and you're bleeding too much and you know that eating a big chunk of that placenta might help. I hear it's not very tasty, but to each their own. I think it was Hillary Duff that threw in a smoothie with some berries and was like, this is the most delicious thing I've ever had. You know, I'll take her word on it. For sure, I will just take her word on that. You get it, girl. So you can do that right away. Like cut up some placenta. Maybe your doula will do it for you or even a midwife and create a smoothie and drink that postpartum, maybe an hour or so after you deliver. Heard of that. So that's a trendy new way to do things as well. This is all new, guys. So I have to say trendy. I'm sorry, but it is. What else you can, so many other different ways. You could make it into a little tincture, so the liquid form, and use it in like droppers, so that can help. You can cut it up, cook it, and put it in a lasagna. Just fry it, eat it like normal meat. Whatever you need to do. You could freeze it and save it for later. You can freeze the capsules. I heard women freezing it and then eating it during their menopause time and they like swear by it. So, okay. Yeah, you can create a lot of different products. Remember, we can create art with it and just put it down on a piece of paper and you're going to see the beautiful tree that your placenta is and then you can frame it. I don't know, do whatever you want with it. Honestly, look into all the ways that you can use your placenta before you just throw it away and see if any of those resonate with you, any of those pique your interest. And it doesn't have to be just consuming it, but understand that, you know, the benefits that are out there, they haven't been proven yet, but maybe they will be proven later on. And some animals do get some benefits out of it and eat it instinctually. Humans haven't been doing it for like a million years. I think it was when we stopped. We used to do it maybe a long time ago for the same animalistic reasons. And I think they said that it stopped once we created fire. Maybe it's because the ash and smoke made it unappetizing, or we just didn't need to because we could burn it now. I don't know. I wasn't there. But anyways, let's say you want to encapsulate it. It'll probably cost you a few $100s to do that. So again, make sure that you have a good conversation with anyone who you're looking to encapsulate your placenta and make sure they follow some kind of guideline. See if it's good enough for you. Ask them why they do this, what the benefits they feel are, what maybe they have some references or why they do what they do. Ask them. Yeah. So just to recap, it's a big divide out there, guys, of whether to eat your placenta or not. And I am not here to tell you one way or the other. You do what you need to do. Just know that there are decisions that need to be made right after you deliver. And one of them is what you want to do with the placenta. And if you don't say anything, we were going to throw it in a little bin, put your name on it. Maybe we'll ask you if you want to see it. That could be something. You could see your placenta. Anyways, we're going to pack it up and we want it out just for your own knowledge. You can keep it out and talk to whoever's going to encapsulate it for you or take it away. Like, can I leave it out? You can leave it out for about 6 hours and then you want to put it in a refrigerator. You want to keep it in the refrigerator for maybe 48 to 72 hours. And then you definitely want to pack it up, whether it's burying it or creating art or whatever you want to do. You want to do that within 72 hours is what I've read. And then you can freeze it for a limited amount of time. So if you're freezing it, you can do that and it's indefinite. So maybe you don't know what to do with it yet. Take it home and freeze it. And maybe you decide something cool after. But I just know that so much of it is mental after we have a baby. And I just would love that you know your options and what's out there. Unbiased, right? And maybe get on the trend. Or if you're like me personally, you're like, you can throw that away. I'm not a super spiritual person, I guess. Who knew? But you know what? Now that I've learned all of this, I kind of wish we did something. I would have probably planted a flower bed or something cool. I don't know. Turn it into ash and throw it into the ocean. Have a little ceremony for my self, my pre-mother self. I don't know. Anyways, this episode has been long enough, so I'll leave it here. Again, send me any questions you have to Colette@myfriendsandnurse.com, and I appreciate you so much. So have a good one. Woof. So I really thought I was going to have like a 30-minute episode on placenta encapsulation. And you know what? I probably could have, and I really have to get better at that. But there's just so much information, and I really wanted to share the history of it. So I could literally talk 20 minutes on just the encapsulation process and how it's done. Maybe I will try to find someone that does the encapsulation process. A few come to mind, and I will invite them on, and we'll have a really good conversation just on that. But now I feel like I have really solid education on what's happening to the placenta right now, why it's so important to us as humans and a society and our culture, and then what we perceived of it before it. So I like to dive into the history of it, and sometimes that takes some time to discuss. So this is a long one. I appreciate you so much. Next week, come back so that we can have a really, really good conversation with Jamie Zaki, who is an IBCLC breastfeeding expert. And I am so excited to speak with her. We just get along so well, and I just absolutely loved our conversation. So I will see you again next week. Again, please, any questions, comments, if you want to argue with me, go for it. Colette@myfriendsandnurse.com, or find me on your socials at myfriendsandnurse. Bye. Thank you for listening to My Friends and Nurse presents the Birthlink podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and found it valuable. Before we go, a quick reminder. The information shared on this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. Always consult with your healthcare provider for any medical concerns or questions. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends. Your support helps us reach more people and continue to bring you great content. Until next time, stay healthy and stay informed.